What's your preferable size of a sprint?
2 weeks.
Oh, God bless you.
If your sprint is too long, they tend to waterfall the sprint.
Yeah.
Right. So you take a 3-week sprint, they do design, they do analysis, they do build. It's like, no.
Hi, this is your project management cowboy coming back to you with another podcast with a formidable PM Cowboy this time. Roy Schilling, a colleague of mine, a guy I love to have discussion with. He's one of those types of guys that I will say this. I consider myself a somewhat expert on the subject matter of Agile, but Roy takes the cake. Roy beats me hands down. And what I love about Roy is you can have really critical discussions about Agile, and he'll very charmingly point out where some of your thought flaws on Agile is and set you straight. He's just a really all-around great guy and colleague of mine. So welcome to the PM Cowboy Podcast, Roy. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mark. And, thank you for that introduction. I don't know if I can follow that.
I'm sure you won't have any trouble. Roy, we have a kind of a tradition, a kind of basic framework of how we run this podcast. One of the things I always like to ask my guests is, in case viewers are wondering who the heck are these two guys, or where the heck do they know each other from? Where do we know each other from?
So we've done a lot of work together, at least, through a similar vendor. Yeah. And we've had many connections when we worked at or presented at the Dubai International Project Management Forum, where we have lots of good debates, lots of discussions.
Exactly.
Shared our stories. Yeah. And that's generally where we know each other from.
Yeah. And that's kind of what led into, hey, we definitely need to do something together, right?
Absolutely.
So I've kind of introduced you already as an expert on Agile, but you've got a long CV. And I always think when I will look at podcasts, one of the next questions I always ask myself, who is this guy talking? What's his background? How can I, in what bucket or what background elements are important to know about him? And I think that's always great if the viewer kind of gets an overview. I like to call it the passion journey. So maybe you can give us a rundown of how did you end up doing or being what you are now, and maybe you'll end up by saying, what is your formal title or function right now?
You got it. So my journey that got me to this point started out years and years, really long time ago. Started out as a software developer, and came out of that, and I was eventually a manager, and then I became a coach, and we'll go into that in just a minute. I was working as a developer for a long time. I was practicing some of these things, and then eventually became a manager and did a lot of work in the banking field. And if you've been in the finance space, if you know much about the regulatory finance space, it is heavy process.
Do you have Basel in the States as well, or just Sarbanes-Oxley?
We've got yes, we have both, actually. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And lots of others.
And lots of other
regulations. And on top of all that, banks are historically and notoriously traditional. I mean, like ultra traditional, not just like what we're used to with good PM practice, like ultra traditional. Yeah. And it really didn't work so well for me, right? And didn't really, we were failing miserably in delivering and things like that. So I started searching for alternatives and landed in the Agile space and decided to take my career elsewhere since there really wasn't much of a future. 2008 happened. Let's be honest. Yeah. 2008, it was time to get out of banking.
Yeah, that was a big ringer for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So then I moved into the consulting space doing Agile coaching. Mm-hmm. So I got here. I've been practicing Agile in various forms for probably around 20 years now. And I've been coaching organizations for pretty close to almost 15, right around the 2008 range. Mm-hmm. I've been about 15 years. So now my job is I'm obviously an Agile trainer. And technically, my title is an enterprise transformation coach. Ooh, not really specifically about Agile. It's more about, and we're going to get into some of the specifics, Agile versus agility. Yeah. It's much more about agility and lean and transforming organizations, different ways of thinking, right? So it's less about Scrum and Kanban and that kind of stuff, and more